Thank you everyone for attending our press conference. My name is Sherry Walter, and I'm the CEO of the Ohio Association of County Behavioral Health Authorities. We're here today to talk about the crisis text line and the work underway in Ohio to promote this resource. You know, this is a free resource, and I want to talk a little bit about what we're doing here in Ohio before I hand it off. The crisis text line is a free, confidential, 24/7 resource, 365 for anyone in need of help. You know, anyone can feel free to use it. All they have to do is text in Ohio for help or for hope to 741-741. It serves all ages, and an individual may text the keyword for hope to 741-741 and expect a reply from a trained counselor within 5 minutes. And the message is confidential, it's anonymous, and it's secure. And Nancy's going to tell you much more about what's happening in Ohio. But thanks to a grant we received from the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, we're working with all of our local alcohol, drug addiction, and mental health boards and other community partners to spread the word about crisis text line in Ohio, where Access is using the keyword for hope. You know, one of the things we know is this started in Stark County, and if you were here earlier, you might have heard that. And John Aller's going to speak, but Stark County really rolled this out and kind of was the prototype for how to make this work. And they've shared their tagline, they've shared all of their information, and we know that it's working and we know that it's a good thing, and that's why we're really trying to make sure that we're getting it out there. Our local boards are rolling it out. They're using billboards, flyers, handouts, and giveaways. They're working with the schools. They've done letters to the editor. They've done connections with local law enforcement, radio interviews, and Facebook. And we know that it's beginning to make an impact. In fact, over the past month, we started a couple of weeks before Christmas. We did a Facebook and Instagram ad campaign, and we know that as of today, 2.9 million times on Facebook and Instagram feeds, this has happened, and we know that 760,000 discrete users have actually seen this ad. And this campaign is going to last through January 31st. So we have a toolkit available, and you can get that at www.oacbha.org. You can get information, you can get materials and guidance, how you can roll this out in your community. You know, it's really just another tool in the toolbox, and it's a free tool. It works whether it's a mental illness, whether you're having a drug crisis, whether it's bullying. It doesn't matter what the issue is. We know that it works. We also know that some people don't want to talk about these issues, but they're willing to text a confidential number, and we know that that makes a difference. So as you're hearing our kind of national, state, and local leaders talking about crisis text line, I hope particularly you as the press will think about how you can help spread this word, because you have access to so many people, and letting this resource be known, if it saves one life, then this press conference today in and of itself was worth it. That's what this is really all about. So we're going to start our press conference with Nancy Lublin, the CEO and founder of the Crisis Text Line. You know, she has an incredible history of working with folks, and she really is the founder of the Crisis Text Line. We will take questions at the end of the the press conference from everybody up here. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Nancy.
I'm really thrilled to be here, not just because, as I said, I was made in Ohio, because my parents both went to Case Western, and that's where they met. I'm sorry, they told me I'm supposed to say Case Western Reserve University. Apparently that's touchy. Okay, anyway. But I'm also thrilled because Ohio is really the first state to take this free resource and really run with it. And so that's largely thanks to Stark County, who reached out to us, Patty and then John, who reached out and said, we want to do this here locally and make it bigger. And as I said in there, what was most exciting to us is when we would give Stark County, or still when we give Stark County data about usage, they noticed that usage dropped in the summer when kids were out of school. And so of their own volition, they said, we need to market this in new ways, and they brought it to movie theaters. And then we saw a 10-fold increase in volume. And we like working with partners who are smart and creative. I love hearing about the work you're doing on Instagram and Facebook to promote this. And we're super excited about expanding things throughout the state of Ohio. I hope more states are inspired by what you're doing here in Ohio to spread the word. Super important. So I thought I would share with you some of the statistics. My favorite statistic actually about Ohio is that there are 48 crisis counselors here. There are 4 of them here. These are volunteers who have gone through an application, a background check, and a 34-hour online training, and now volunteer at least 4 hours a week on the platform to save lives. But recognize that means that there are 48 people in Ohio who are also in your schools, in your churches, in your communities who have this training. Those are like secret Jedis with legs and hearts walking around. So I encourage the press also to talk to them when I'm done. Let me just share again some of the statistics that I shared in my lunchtime remarks. So we have had 33,466 conversations in Ohio in less than 3 years. That's 15,456 people, because some of them, of course, have texted in more than once. And 61% of those have said that they've shared something with us, with our crisis counselors, that they have never shared with another human being. This is a confidential, private way to communicate whatever crisis is going on with you. And it is free. In fact, it's not only free, they're not charged a texting fee, we don't show up on bills. And if you want to ask me how that happened, it's a great Richard Branson story, and I can talk about that in Q&A. And there have been 243 active rescues in Ohio. We, of course, hope to avoid active rescues. Our job is to take someone from a hot moment to a cool moment, help them figure out a coping skill, and de-escalate what's going on with them and take care of themselves. But sometimes it's an imminent risk to themselves or someone else, and we can't de-escalate, and we need to call 911 because they're sitting with a gun in their hand and the intent to shoot themselves or someone else, or they've already ingested something lethal. And at that point, we have to call 911. Have you all done active rescues? Yeah, so have I. It's scary. There have been 243 in Ohio. Those are individuals and families and friends who would be in a much different place today if not for Crisis Text Line. Let's talk about who the texters are in Ohio. 79% of the texters here have been under the age of 25, which means, of course, that 21% of texters have been 26 or older. That's very exciting also. And very interesting to us is that 10% of the texters in Ohio have been under the age of 13. Think about that. Not everybody under the age of 13 even has a cell phone. 47% of the texters here have said that they are heterosexual, which is interesting to note that actually the majority of texters here are not. And 85% of texters identify as white. The peak times in Ohio where we see crisis between about 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. It's actually slightly earlier than the big traffic that the crisis counselors know we get usually in the rest of the country. And Thursdays are a particularly tough day, apparently, in Ohio. The top issues that we've seen are depression, suicidal ideation, and stress. Those are by far the top 3 issues. But there are 3 issues, which I did not mention at lunch, but I'd like to point out, over-index in Ohio compared to the rest of the country. 3 issues where it's acute in Ohio, and that's bullying, friend issues, and physical abuse. Those are higher in Ohio than the majority of the rest of the country. As I mentioned, cut is a top 10 word that we see showing up in Ohio. About 1 in 5 texters indicate self-harm and cutting. Another thing that I didn't mention earlier is that the word school here is associated with 2 words that are very interesting and slightly different from most of the country. We usually see words like teacher and class. Here in Ohio, when we see the word school, we see the word friend and mom. I don't know what that means, but I'm just here to report the data, which leads me to the last point, which is this is open for research. You have fantastic academic institutions in Ohio, and we would welcome research in this data set to help figure out what is going on in Ohio with the opioid crisis that the governor spoke about, with any of the issues that I just mentioned. We would welcome research. It's free. It just has to be for non-commercial use and be an accepted application. We put an IRB process and an ethics committee in place, and we have top researchers from Stanford, all over the country, we'd love some Ohio research to help figure this out and fuel funding. How should more and smarter funding be spent in Ohio to help reduce stigma and to help journalists find interesting stories and things to write about. So I'm looking forward to seeing research applications from Ohio. And my only other request would be to share the number. Please share For Hope at 741-741. We would really love to help more people. We'd love to help more people in Ohio. We're there with open hearts and open minds, 24/7, no judgments. Those are empathy MVPs right there. And I think they'd love to help their neighbors. So thank you.